Hey guys, this is Alexander from Solar Leather Machines. Today I'd like to cover the adjustment for our CB801 bell knife skiver. Have a look at this machine here. If you look at this machine, there's a whole bunch of knobs and levers, and many people can't help but to twiddle with them. Unfortunately, when you get the machine, it is already adjusted to skive just the way you've asked for it. So when you start twiddling with the knobs, you set it out of adjustment. Also, there's not normally a great manual that goes with this. Not only this machine, but several others are like it, like a Fortuna machine and several other different brands, but it's all basically the same kind of mechanism. What you have here is a cup-shaped blade that's spinning on an axle driven down here by a belt. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through the basic adjustments that you need if your machine is not skiving well. Okay, so the first thing you want to do, of course, is basically take everything away from the blade. And by that I mean specifically this stone here. Inside there is a football shaped stone that is intended to grip the fabric and or leather and force it onto the blade. Now many people want to put that right up next to the blade, but when that happens, what happens is the stone carves on that blade and it dulls your blade almost immediately. So that's the number one mistake that people make. Okay, there's a couple of other adjustments to that we'll cover here in just a minute. But first off, the first thing you want to do when you get this machine is make sure that that lever, that silver lever that drops the foot, is in the up position. This lever, what it does is it applies the foot pressure to the leather, and you only need to use it when you're actually using the machine. So you put it up, okay? Now this top chrome knob, what that does is micro adjustments for the foot. So if you micro adjust it when it's down, it'll grip that leather a little bit better. A micro adjustment when the chrome lever is up doesn't really do anything for you. Sometimes if there's pressure on there, it can be a little bit easier to add that micro adjustment when it's up and then put the foot down, okay? Don't overthink that, okay? Now once the machine has been adjusted, this is pretty much the only adjustment you're going to touch. And that's where people get themselves into trouble, especially some guys who see a knob, they can't help themselves, they have to twiddle it, okay? Hold on to that. You don't want to do that, okay? Especially if the machine is in good operating order, try not to mess with it. Okay, as we said before in our other video, this machine is not for beginners. And if you mess it up badly and you can't figure this adjustment video out, then you're going to have to send it back to us for adjustment, okay? All right. Let's cover the two basic groups here. The first group is this group right here, and it looks awfully complicated, but it does a couple of different things here. What it really does is adjust the tilt of the stone wheel. And come in close and see, hopefully you can see that stone wheel. You see that tilt there? Okay. Now, I want you to look very carefully at this blade and try to get right down inside. There you go, just like that. Now, we're going to back out just a little bit so you can see these knobs down here, okay? And a little bit further out, down here, okay. Now, this knob, what it does is it increases and decreases the amount of spring tension on this assembly. You want it pretty darn tight, okay? You really don't want that thing to move out of the way if you don't need to. So you're going to pretty much screw it all the way in and make sure that's tight. Now other people have different opinions and that's fine, but that's how I typically set it, okay? And this lower section right here sets the actual overall tilt of this football shaped drive wheel, okay? And so this knob right here locks it into place. This knob right here adjusts the tilt. So I am going to actually throw it off just so you see how it works. Okay, I'm going to screw it way in, way in. Okay, now let's look up here at this blade. Okay, and you can see that that is off now. Let's zoom right in there if we can. There we go. It's off. Now it's no longer parallel. Now I want you to stay in that position while I screw it back and make sure that it's parallel. See, it's coming back. Okay, that's about right. That stone is about parallel with the blade all the way across, or rather concentric is the correct term, okay? So once it's in that position, I'm going to lock this down, okay? Does it really matter how critical it is? Is it precisely 20 thousandths? It really doesn't matter that much. You want to be pretty close with it, that's for sure. Your eyeball is very sensitive, and you can see very small amounts, especially when it comes to parallel surfaces. So that is generally about what you want. Now notice, by the way, the other thing on this is the amount of space between the stone and the blade. You do not want that stone to touch the blade, so we've got a goodly amount of space between the stone and the blade, okay? Now here's the thing about it. If you don't have space on that blade, the cut leather, the pieces that you're trying to pull off, won't have anywhere to go. And so they get stuck there and it just doesn't carve very well, okay? So that leads us to our next group. And let's go over here, okay? And this group, what this does is control the tilt of the stone. And I want you to look at the stone over here, okay? You see how it goes up and down? Now zoom right in on that stone, okay? See that drops? It doesn't change the tilt, but it does change the spacing, okay? And so that's what that group is for. So let's go over to the second group again. Let's look at this, okay? This lever here, it's actually a spring hook, and all it does is increase the tension on this assembly, okay? There's a long spring. I like to keep it about the 3rd notch, but opinions vary, okay? So to just set it, you're gonna pull it out and hook it right there, okay? And that just increases the tension on this assembly. This one right here adjusts the depth of the stone. This one locks it here. Adjust the depth, locks it, okay? Now, what I want you to do is look over here on this stone, okay? And I'm going to increase the depth. So zoom right in on that stone, okay? And I'm going to increase the depth. And you can see, as I'm turning this knob here, more room in the stone. Now, there's a fine line you get to. Let's come back over to the stone. When your spacing here is too much, you won't get the drive for the leather that you need. So there's an optimal spacing. It very much depends on your type of leather, but generally you want it, right about there or so. Okay, that's generally about right, okay? Now, some people say, well, I want to cut ultra thin leather. Well, like anything, especially in leather, the thinner it is, the thinner the leather that you're working with, the more skilled you have to be. So if you're a beginner, don't start with thin leather, start with thicker leather. Learn your skills first and then start going into the thinner leathers. It will make more sense that way, okay? So now that we have this, this drive wheel set for tilt and then vertical placement in relation to the bell knife, now we can move on. Okay, now you do have some tilt and vertical placement with this foot here. So if you look at this knob back here, this knob adjusts the tilt of the foot. And we normally put this in pretty darn tight. In fact, I think I've locked it in pretty good here. But what that will do is that changes the tilt of the foot. And you want that foot roughly parallel with the knife. Okay, you can see that it's pretty darn close. All right. Now, you want it parallel. Sometimes, depending on which machine you have, you may have 2 feet. This one, I believe, is the 30 or 35 millimeter foot. Sometimes they come with a 50 millimeter foot, which is a little bit longer. Still matches the curve of the knife. That's fine. You can use either foot, no problem there. I like the 35 millimeter foot because it carves a slightly smaller skive into the leather. And if I'm doing pockets or something, I don't really want a big skive. So again, you just want to make sure that that foot is generally parallel. Now, that does mean that if you adjust the foot correctly, you can get a bevel skive. Okay, you can get a bevel skive, but again, until you get more skill with the machine, you probably shouldn't be trying to do a bevel skive, because once you move it out of its adjustable or adjusted position, you'll have to get it back. And if you don't know how to get it back, then you're going to end up calling us. So again, get used to your machine first, use it a bit, develop some skill, and then start messing with your machine. Okay. What else we got going on here? Okay, so this is the material guide. Okay, now it's got an odd shape. It's got a hook shape. So you come in and zoom in there. Okay, you can see that hook shape, and that's because the surface of the machine has two different levels, and you can hold it here like this. Okay, so if you're trying to skive something at a particular parallel shape, you can use that hook to kind of hold that piece in place. Is it perfect? No. To be honest, I rarely use it. I have a certain amount of skill with this machine, so normally I can just hold it as I go through it and get a pretty good edge. Having said that, there's nothing wrong with using it. Okay. Now, one important piece is you'll find that this material guide does not sit well with this little hump here. Okay. There's a hump, and it very much depends on your machine. This hump is actually removable. It's made to match the bell knife and to match the stone when the leather goes across, but it is removable, and then underneath of it is this flat surface. So both of those are acceptable to run your material across, but again, you have to develop the skills to do this. If you do take this hump out, be sure to hold those fasteners carefully and not to lose them. They're special fasteners, and they're going to be a pain in the butt if you need to order one. But generally, most people don't need to do that. Okay. If for some reason you do want to use the material guide on that hump, then it's easy enough. You just turn it over, and you'll screw it down like that. Okay. And then you can use your material guide as normal. Okay. All right, and we're going to move that out of the way. I tend to move it over here. As I said, when I'm skiving, I rarely use that, but I've had many hours practice. Okay, cover some of the other knobs. This knob here controls a slider inside the bell knife. If you look inside the mechanism there, you will find that there's just a piece of sheet steel that reaches into the bell knife and helps scrape away the cut pieces of leather. Okay. And so this will loosen, and you can reach in there with your fingers and push it in. Now, one thing I will tell you is this bell knife is extraordinarily sharp. So sharp that if you were to touch it straight on without moving your fingers, you might still very well cut yourself. I've cut myself very badly with this bell knife skiver several times. So I always wear gloves. If you can, use Kevlar gloves. I think you can get the Kevlar gloves from Uline for about 12 or 14 bucks depending on where you are. But again, that controls the lock mechanism for a piece of steel that goes in there and helps scoop out some of the leather. That can actually get in the way more often than not, so you don't want to fully deploy it in there. You want to deploy it about halfway in. Okay. Generally, I would suggest don't mess with it. Okay. Now, these two knobs over here are to do two things. This one's for disassembly. Okay, when you're trying to disassemble the shaft, if you have worn down your bell knife and you need to replace that bell knife, you put a rod in here to hold the shaft, and then you start to unscrew things over here. Okay. Generally, you won't need to mess with that a whole lot. Just leave that alone. Okay. Now these two other knobs, the two remaining knobs right here, one right here and one right here, work in tandem. And what happens here, this one engages a belt that runs in the back of the machine. And if you look underneath the machine, or you look in the side of the machine, you will find that belt runs all the way up here, and it drives a mechanism inside there. And you can see it in blue there, okay? And that belt drives that. I think that blue is a stone, and that's the sharpening stone. So what you're going to do when you want to sharpen the blade, and it's a very particular process, you're going to pull that lever out, push that lever down. Now, that lever does not go very far. It only drops about maybe 20, 25 degrees. You're going to push it down, okay? And you don't have to get really forceful on it. Just push it down, get it engaged, okay? So now that belt will be engaged. And then you'll start to turn this counterclockwise. And as you slowly turn it counterclockwise, the machine will run and it will slowly bring that wheel to bear against the blade. And I'll show you how to do that here in just a minute. But you just touch that blade. Now, don't get happy and start grinding real hard on it. This machine does not need you to grind hard on it. Just be patient. A little at a time does a lot more, okay? All right, so now that we've gone through the basic adjustments here, and what each of the knobs do, now we got to check out to make sure that the machine, all the adjustments we've done, don't cause any issue. So we've got the machine turned on. We know that we've got space on the stone. We're just going to ease onto the pedal real gentle. There we go. Nice smooth operation. I'm not hearing a whole lot of scraping. I am hearing just a little bit of those discs on the drive side rub in there. That's fine. It's not a big deal. Now, some machines have a different type of guard than this. They have a two-piece guard with a piece up here and a piece down here, and the actual bell knife is available and you can see it. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, many times you can take this guard off and you can operate the machine like that. Sometimes easier, but I will tell you, if you take the guard off, you stand a better chance of cutting yourself, and I will not be held responsible if you damage yourself. So be very, very cautious if you do decide to take that guard off. But sometimes it can actually be a little bit easier to work with. Again, once you develop a skill set, you don't have to worry about that actually, and many times you can work with it with the guard on or the guard off. Now, a word about this knife. It's a cup-shaped knife. It looks like a soup cup, and you can actually wear this down to a certain extent. If you get more than about a 1/4 inch or so of wear in there from grinding it, then you're going to probably want to get a new knife. I think of maybe in my time I've only seen one knife replaced. And it's a job to do, and it's one of those jobs you probably want to send the head back to your dealer and pay them to replace the knife for you. It can be a bit of a chore if things are frozen or stuck in there. But generally, these knives remain in service for a very long period of time. They're not apt to grind down very much while you're in service, simply because you're not doing anything but running leather through it, which doesn't tend to dull the blade very much, okay? So we've run this now. We know that nothing is in the way, okay? So let me show you how to sharpen the blade. What you're going to do, you're going to have the machine running. Again, you're going to pull this lever out and down. And I'm going to speak up a little bit more because it's making more noise. You can hear that belt running in there, okay? And I'm going to slowly turn this knob counterclockwise. And as it starts to contact, I'll hear it contact the blade in behind here. There we go. And we're just going to let it contact for a bit. Maybe one more twist. We'll see a few sparks. That's all that's required. Just let it spin just a little bit like that. You'll see the shine on the blade change a little bit here. You might have had a little corrosion on the blade or something. And once you grind down this blade, you'll find that any streaks or cuts or scratches in that ground surface will be removed, and you'll have a nice even blade. Now, again, remember, when you're doing this, that blade becomes very, very sharp. You do not want to mess around. Okay, we should let it run for just a little bit. Doesn't take very long at all. Maybe 15, 20 seconds. You're going to turn the knob back the other way a little bit, okay? You're going to lift this lever, and there you go. Your blade is sharp and ready to go. Okay, So that is the base adjustment for these machines. The next thing we're going to do is cut some leather and stop. Now, these two knobs over here are to do two things. This one's for disassembly, okay? When you're trying to disassemble the shaft, if you have worn down your bell knife and you need to replace that bell knife, you put a rod in here to hold the shaft, and then you start to unscrew things over here, okay? Generally, you won't need to mess with that a whole lot. Just leave that alone, okay? Now these two other knobs, the two remaining knobs right here, one right here and one right here, work in tandem. And what happens here, this one engages a belt that runs in the back of the machine. And if you look underneath the machine, or you look in the side of the machine, you will find that that belt runs all the way up here, and it drives a mechanism inside there. And you can see it in blue there, okay? And that belt drives that. I think that blue is a stone, and that's the sharpening stone. So what you're going to do when you want to sharpen, okay, so quick coffee break there. And what we're going to do here is we're going to skive the edge of this leather. This is about 3.5 to 4 ounce upholstery leather. This is the type of leather this machine was made for, softer leathers. This machine will not do veg tan at this in this configuration, especially like the 10 to 12 ounce harness leather is not meant to do that. This machine is meant for anywhere from 2 to maybe 6 ounce leathers at the most. It does a good job with the soft leathers, but just to make clear, people who think they're going to get veg tan or harness leathers across that are going to be disappointed. It's meant for people who make bags, light wallets, notebook covers, that type of stuff. It's very, very good at that. But we've already done a video about this. What we're going to do here now is we're going to take this leather and we're going to put it in here. Okay. Now, an important thing about the spacing with the foot. Okay. Many people want to crank right down and force that foot to squeeze onto the leather. Well, if you do that, it will not feed very well. You do have to provide some assistance. And that leather is just a little bit too much. There we go. Okay. You want it to be able to slide a little bit under that foot. You see that? Just a little bit of slide. Okay. You don't want it so tight like this that it won't move. Okay, that's not going to get you anything. It needs to be able to slide under there. All right. Now, another mistake that people make is they think that they just stick the leather right here, feed it in there, and it just skives. Unfortunately, that is not the case. You do have to start in about 1 inch, like this, so you can grab it here. And then as you start to skive through, you will guide the leather along the blade by using a combination of pulling here and pulling down here. You'll get to use it or get the feel of it very, very quickly, okay? The blade wants to pull it in that direction, so if it wants to shift in that direction, you just let it go and it will tend to pull it in that direction, all right? So you'll start about here, and let's see how we've got this set right now, okay? Now notice that the leather's not moving here, okay? That's fine. The drive wheel on the stone is only meant to help. It's not meant to be a 1-for-1 travel and feed. You're not actually going to cut very well. It's meant to help. Now I'm going to increase the force on that just a little bit. There we go. You should feel it want to throw itself onto the blade, okay? But you should be able to overcome it with some finger pressure. So now I'm just going to pull it like this. I'm not pulling very hard, maybe 3 or 4 ounces in both directions. All right, so ran it through just like that. Now, you can see that it has barely cut that. Okay, just barely touched that. Now, 2 points. In order to do a cut like that, that blade has to be very, very sharp. Okay, so that gives you an idea just how sharp that is. Some people ask, well, can you use this method to even out a piece of leather? Yes, you can, but you're going to be there for a while as you go down row by row, okay? All right, so now let's cut just a little bit more out of that. I think I'm going to take a little bit more. So I'm going to lift the foot. I'm going to add just a little bit more pressure to the foot, and we're going to do the same exact thing again. Drop the foot, hold it about an inch in, and pull it through. All right, that's a little bit more, okay? That's not bad. Might be time to get a little bit more aggressive with that foot pressure. You always want to start out slow. All right, so a little bit more foot pressure on that. That's better. Okay, so now we're down to about half of where we started. Let's take it a little bit more. We're going to lift it up, tighten it down. Okay. Now, when the distance between the foot and the stone become less than the thickness of the leather, things will start jamming up and you'll have problems. The answer to that is then you actually put more space between the stone and the foot, and you'll do it down here on this knob. Okay. And you'll just do it like so. Yeah, that's about right, okay? Just quarter turns at a time, very small adjustments. Okay, so let's do this again. Real easy like. Small adjustments. There we go. Okay, so that's dramatically thinner now. We're probably looking at about a little bit more than half, maybe not quite a third of the thickness here. But we're going to continue to take it down more because some people want it paper thin. So again, we lift it up, we're going to twiddle it down a little bit more, and then we're just going to do it again. Now at some point, you'll be cutting it very, very thin, almost paper thin, and you'll be cutting through the leather. And that is just, you've reached the limits of what your leather can take and what the machine can do. Okay, so that's very thin now. Now we're going to go ahead and take it some more. All right, that's it. And cut. Okay, so that's now very, very thin. We're going to continue on though. I want you to show how thin, I want you to see how thin it will actually go. So we're going to continue on. Again, we're going to add a little bit more pressure to the foot. Hold it down. We're going to continue on. Okay, we're getting pretty close to paper. Add a little bit more pressure. Really getting into it now. At some point, we're going to find ourselves cutting into the epidermis, and on leather, many times you will see the outer layer, the epidermis, change colors. We're starting to see that now, that whitish color right there. It's starting to lighten up a bit. We're getting very close. You can actually start to see some of the grain on the underside now. So very, very thin. We're going to continue on. Basically, I'm going to continue on until we start to cut through. And there we are. Too much. Cut right through that. So let's try that again over here. Helps if you pull up just a little bit, or just too much. All right, so yeah, it will get there. I mean, just paper thin, but you've got to adjust it in carefully. So let's do something here. Now that we've done this, we've set it all the way down on this end. Let's do this edge and get it quite thin as well. But what we're going to do is we're going to back it off just a little bit because we don't really want it that thick or that thin. Okay. So we're going to start right here. All right, so again, starting out about 3 to 4 ounces, and we're just going to go from here. Okay. just like that. All right. Okay, so you can see the lightening of the color here as we've gone pretty much to the epidermis, and we've started to see the grain here. So that is that's properly adjusted. That's what you're looking for when you're trying to adjust this machine. It's easier to go thicker from here. That's not a problem. Going thinner, you're just going to tear into the grain side of the leather, the top grain, so to speak. Okay, so that's properly adjusted. If you want to keep going thinner, then you'll back it up, and we'll continue on. Now, people say, well, Alex, what about that ½ inch or the inch that you need to get started? Well, it all depends on how you finish it. So let's say I'm doing this edge right here. Start in an inch or so like this, like that. So now I've got this, and I want to skive that portion. Well, I turn it 90 degrees, and I put it right about there. Just like that. And that's how I do that. And when you turn it over, you won't notice any difference, okay? And that just takes a little bit of practice. Now let's take a little bit more depth off that. Just making an example again. We're gonna see how when I'm doing this, now that it's properly adjusted, the only thing I'm really touching is this knob and this lever. That's pretty much it. Okay, yeah, that's pretty good. Do that last corner. Like anything else, these machines take practice. All right, that's it. That's how you adjust your CB801 skiver. Make sure, by the way, about once a week, if you're using it a lot, to blow off the machine, clean it off, get that leather dust out. Because the leather dust is, it can get jammed up in the machine if you're really dirty and you don't really clean out your machine a whole lot. It can be jammed up in there, and it actually can be a bit of a fire hazard because it will burn when it's dusted like this. So if you have any questions, this is Alexander from Solar Leather Machines. Our phone number is 817-422-9151, and this machine is the CB801 Bell Knife Skiver. Thanks a lot. And cut.